Hello, listeners. Welcome to Marie Lives the Horror. This is episode 21 of the series of True Paranormal Ghost Stories. In tonight's episode, we hear of a featureless entity that can't seem to let go. A tale of a late-night ghostly visitor at a school's library, and a very strange encounter with a seemingly helpless old woman. So without further ado, step into my horror chamber as we live the horror together. Number 1. A spiritual attachment. I was almost 15 whenever we first moved to Lynn. My mom had married my stepdad not long prior, and they had bought a house together in a suburb in his hometown. I remember the house feeling surprisingly frightening when I first stepped into it, like the air inside was somehow thicker and heavier. Not long after we settled in, I was staring at the ceiling over my bed. My blinds were blocking out the streetlight's glow from outside, so the room was fairly dark. It was then that I noticed something swirling, almost like smoke, on the ceiling above me. It was darker than darkness, and the harder I stared at it, the less I could distinguish a form in it. It was simply a black mass, twisting and twirling over me. I remember feeling startled but not afraid the first time I laid eyes on it. As the nights went on, I would fall asleep watching this thing churn. I began to think it was simply my mind playing tricks on me because of the low lighting. My birthday rolled around. I had the neighbors over for a little party at the house. We had fun, played games, and ate lots of food. As night drew in, I'd been plagued with an idea I couldn't shake. I wanted to see if anyone else could see the thing on my ceiling. I asked 2 of the girls to come into my room, both of whom had no knowledge of what I'd been seeing. We laid on the bed together. I asked them to just watch the ceiling and tell me what they saw. It wasn't long before I could see the mass, which seemed to be growing larger with each passing visit, swirling over my bed. At the exact same time, both girls shot out of my bed and took off running to the living room. I followed them and asked them what they saw. They were so shaken. For a moment, they failed to speak, but eventually they both described exactly what I had seen. The next morning, there was only one girl at the house. She was standing next to my closet talking to me as she packed her things to return home. I remember hearing a small sound, something like shuffling, before a large box in the top of my closet flew off the shelf and slammed into the closet door. The girl jumped at first, as I did, but neither of us paid it much mind after I put it back. About a month later, Halloween was right around the corner. My mom and I were in an argument, as we often were at that time. She was sitting at her desk working on her computer. The desk itself had a shelf on top that was about a foot wide. Roughly 3 inches above the desk, there was a wreath that hung on the wall. When the argument got particularly heated, the wreath suddenly flew off the wall, cleared the top of the desk shelf, and narrowly missed my mother's head. Both of us were so stunned The argument ended there. As the years passed by, the black mass on my ceiling stayed until I moved back to my hometown. There, the activity seemed to increase. My belongings would move on their own. I'd hear walking outside my door, and once I even heard a chuckle behind me while I was walking through the hallway. I became convinced that whatever the black mass was had followed me to my dad's. I never felt any malice or ill intent when it teased me. However, there were occasions when I became upset that it would lash out like it did that night with my mother. I could hear its footsteps upstairs late at night, where nobody lived or entered. It wasn't until I was about 18 that I truly saw the being for the first time. I was awoken in the early morning from a bad dream. I was facing the back of the couch I was sleeping on. When I rolled over, I was face to face with something that was darker than darkness. It had no features on its face, but it had horns that cascaded from the top of its head, no less than 7 inches. I could feel its breath on my face, hot and humid as it brushed my skin. I was so startled that I froze. When I blinked, I was suddenly alone again. Unsure how to respond, I rolled over and fell back to sleep. It's been about 5 years now. I've only seen him a handful of times since that night. The activity had been oddly sparse in the last 3 months. I moved back home to my mom's after some financial trouble, and things have been extremely hectic. Lately, though, I'm beginning to hear those same sounds: footsteps, tapping, sometimes even murmuring when I'm completely alone. This shadow being has become such a regular part of my life that it rarely surprises me when he does anything. However, it's been a long time since the noises were this loud. I'm not concerned so much as I'm curious. Why now? What's changed? I saw him for the first time in a long time last night. My mom was staying at her boyfriend's, and I was up late watching movies when I decided to make myself some food. While I was sitting at the table eating, I was looking through TikTok whenever I noticed movement in the sliding glass door that leads to the back patio. I gazed out into the night and was met with his looming figure peering back at me. As I mentioned before, he has no eyes, no features at all, but I could feel him staring at me. He was observing me. I decided to brush it off and return to my food. When I glanced back moments later, he was gone. If anyone else has experienced activity or an attachment similar to this, I'd love to hear it. I'm not sure what he is or where he came from, but I view him as some sort of protector or guardian. Please share any comments or experiences with me. Number 2. Little girl who has followed me since I was 13. I am scared to acknowledge these experiences because I'm afraid they'll start up again even if I breathe a word of it. I will proceed. I believe my first experience with her started when I was 13 and I was staying the weekend at my Mimi's grandmother's house. She would always talk to me about this spirit she felt like was in her house. She told me that she'd hear footsteps, knocks, whispers, and small touches. I was sleeping on the couch, and I distinctly remember waking up to a loud thump coming from the kitchen, which was diagonal from where I was laying, meaning I could see directly into the kitchen. I saw absolutely nothing because I thought, oh, maybe Mimi went in for a late night snack or a drink. I thought nothing of it, even though I didn't see her in the kitchen. I closed my eyes and tried to fall back to sleep. I was woke up by yet another loud thump coming from the kitchen. This time I lifted myself onto my elbows and stared into the kitchen. The entire house was dark, except for the overhead light on her stove vent. It was enough light to see the entire kitchen, and yet I saw no one and couldn't figure out the source of the noise. Right as I was about to lay down and put headphones in, I saw a small, probably around 4-foot tall shadow dart from the kitchen and run down the hallway towards the bathroom. I remember being shocked because I couldn't process what I had seen. It was a full body apparition and it was solid black. It wasn't transparent at all. I never saw her again that night. The next time I experienced her was a few years later when I was maybe 19. I was staying the night at my parents' house, and the next morning I got up to brush my teeth. My parents live in a double wide, so my siblings' bedroom and the bathroom were all connected by a small, quote-unquote, hallway. I put hallway in quotation marks because it is just a tiny square of a hallway, not a massively long hallway. All the doors were shut. My 2 sisters were in the room across from the bathroom, and my brother's bedroom was behind the bathroom. My mom and dad were watching TV in the living room at the time. I lean over and start brushing my teeth. I hear a clear as day, "Maddie," and assuming it was one of my sisters, to my right, and I didn't see them in my peripheral, but didn't think anything of it. I annoyingly went, "What?" I was a real B-word to my siblings when I was a teenager, so I was normally annoyed when they were bothering me. When I didn't hear them respond, I looked up and no one was there. I poke my head out and look at my parents in the living room and ask, "Did you call my name?" They looked at me all confused and said, no. So then I opened my sister's room and they were playing a board game and they said they didn't call my name. I asked my brother and he said the same thing. That was the first time I heard her. Next experience was maybe that same year, but a different time. I was over there. My mom, my one sister, and I were all on the couch watching something on HGTV, most likely House Hunters. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, and to my right was the kitchen, and to my left was the rest of the living room. I don't remember what joke I had said about the show, but clear as day, we all heard this little girl giggled in my right ear. We all turned and looked at each other and asked if we all heard the same thing. The next experience, my little brother had a toy remote motorcycle that he loved. Well, it was broken as far as being able to control it with the remote. He would still push it around by hand. We were all just watching TV again in the living room, and this toy motorcycle was under the coffee table. All of a sudden, it starts moving forward. We all stop what we were talking about and stare at it. The thing doesn't work electronically. How was it possibly moving on its own? We would then sit and ask yes or no questions. If it was a yes, we said to move the motorcycle, and it would move every time. Flash forward 2 years, and I had my own apartment with my fiancé. My Mimi had given me a board called the Psychic Circle. I only played with it when there was multiple people, just so I didn't absentmindedly move it myself. Well, I would ask a question only I would know in my head, and look down so I couldn't see the board. My sisters then would tell me what it spelled out, and it was right every single time. I asked who they were. They said their name was Anna, and they were 12 years old, and they had a little brother named Jonas who was 8. We always asked if we could talk to Jonas, and she would say no, he's too shy. I then would ask her, "Have you been the one following me all these years?" And she would say yes. She said she was my spirit guide, and that she had died on my parents' property. There was a house on the other side of my parents' property a very long time ago. A tall, 2-story white colonial house. It burnt down in 1950, I think, from what my dad said. I think they did research, and the family all died inside the house. I remember asking Anna if she was buried on the property, and she said she was in the cemetery behind my parents' house, up on the hill. We climbed up there, and there are children gravestones, but none that said Anna or Jonas. I then remember asking her where her grave is, and she would say it was never marked with a headstone. That same year, me and my fiancé were alone in the house and hadn't messed with the board anymore. We always lay back to back, as we say, butt to butt. Well, we said our goodnights and were going to sleep. I remember feeling fingertips tapping all the way up my spine. I just assumed it was my fiancé, so I didn't bother waking him. Only then did he say, "Did you touch my back?" I instantly woke up, eyes wide, and turned towards him. I said, "No. Did you touch me? 'Cause I felt fingertips up my back." My fiancé was a very big skeptic because he had never experienced anything before, and he was freaked out. It had been about 4 years since then, and he still talks about how much it creeped him out. I haven't felt, heard, or seen this little girl Anna since 2016/2017. After that instance with my fiancé, I kind of miss her in a weird way. Number 3. My very own paranormal pal. So this is going to be long. I'll put the TLDR here. Basically, an entity has attached itself to me and is basically unremovable. So this has been going on for basically my whole life. Even before my first memories, my mom has told me that I've been seeing and hearing things. I've always wondered if it was an overactive imagination or if I was schizophrenic. I've always been able to feel energies really well. Not so much vibes that people give off, but just spiritual energies, so to speak. It was always felt by the tensing of my ears and the muscles behind them, along with the tingling in the back of my head if it was strong. I remember even getting so bad I got dizzy. When I was really young, it bothered me because I didn't know what was going on. But the older I got, the more I allowed myself to feel it and experience things, so to speak. Growing up in my parents' house, it was always present, whatever it was. I always knew it was one entity, taking on the form of multiple ones, like an old man that lurked in the doorways of our house, or a little girl that would cry at night, even an otherworldly creature, only seen once, that would resemble a skinny, white-skinned creature roughly about 5 feet tall. When I was in elementary school, it was always my name being called from another room, only to be told I was never called for. Then it went to my foot being grabbed at night and being awoken by it. In the height of the hauntings, when I allowed myself to be vulnerable to the entity, it would turn and shake my doorknob at night, create footsteps in the attic. Our attic at its peak was only 5 feet, no flooring either. Even pacing around the house from my door to the living room, to the kitchen, and back to my door. My mom told me that one night, while I was away, she hears my drawers being opened and slammed, and my stuff being thrown around in the room, only to find it in disarray when she checked, and no evidence of me or someone else being there. It never physically harmed anyone. It caused negative emotions in the house, though. My mom said that she could feel dread just pulling into the driveway after work. It all became too much for everyone. My parents had a priest come bless the house, exorcise it, and bless every single one of us as well. He stated that a portal was in my room and that it resided in it. That it wasn't demonic, but wasn't good either. Anyways, exactly 4 months went by of no activity, before I started to hear the footsteps, voices, and seeing shadows in the corner of my eye. My then girlfriend heard me talking one day when I had walked away from the phone during a call. I was on the other end of the house, not saying anything at the time. I was also alone at home. One night, she stated that I turned to her in my sleep and said, "They're coming." And when she asked, I replied, "Them." I've never sleepwalked in my life, nor have I since then. However, I moved out. Things were quiet in my own place, peaceful, but after about 4 weeks, I began to feel its presence seeping in. Then I saw it at the bottom of my stairs one night, out of the corner of my eye. Then I heard it walking downstairs. I felt it staring at me from the doorways and even at the bottom of the stairs. Now, as of tonight, I've seen it in the kitchen when it's dark, just standing there with both my eyes staring dead at it. It doesn't feel evil or threatening. It's just merely a presence. What I wish to know is, how the hell does it survive a blessing? I've even personally asked it to leave any object it's attached to. It's not so bothering to me, just makes me uneasy seeing something in the dark, only to turn the light on and nothing is there. If you wish to ask any personal questions, or to know more about my experiences with it in the past, please DM me and I'll answer them. Number 4. My university's library. Back in fall of 2019, I would frequently study at my university's library. It had a new addition built in the 90s, and most people would occupy that part. I would use the older side of the library because it was usually empty and very quiet. Anyway, I would go take the steps down to the library's basement, and there was a long hallway consisting of private classrooms and storage. But towards the way back, there was a very small room for studying that had a few desks and 3 tall bookshelves. It was around 9 p.m., and I was the last one studying inside the room. One of the night guards was sitting by the door, occupied by his crossword puzzle book. He was an older man, but he was very nice, and sometimes will let me stay a little past closing time to let me study. I was halfway through my environmental science homework when things started getting a little odd. The sound of a door opening, then closing loudly, echoed throughout the hallway just across from where I was sitting. The guard looked a bit surprised at first. No one was allowed downstairs at those hours. I heard him radio one of his fellow guards, and he asked if anyone else was down in the basement making rounds. He was met with a negative. He got up and left the room without saying a word. I went back to studying, and 10 minutes or so had passed since the guard left. "It's very late," a woman's voice yelled from what sounded like right behind me. I turned around thinking it was a professor, but no one was there or in the hallway. I frantically packed up my things and headed towards the door. I didn't even bother to look back. I just noped out of there. I bolted up the stairs, and I was met with the guard from earlier. He asked if I was all right, and I nodded yes, and that it was just getting late. "What? Did old Maggie scare you?" he chuckled. I paused, confused. He looked at me for a moment and nodded. He told me that Maggie was a librarian that used to work for the school back in the 1950s. But she was struck in a hit and run just outside the university one winter's night. She had worked for the school for 12 years and apparently was a very sweet old woman, and he didn't learn about her until he himself had a few weird occurrences on a few of his shifts. Since that night, I tried only studying in the newer edition if the downstairs study rooms were empty. Number 5. I hope you all believe me. I have a lot of experience with the paranormal, and I've always been told by others with extraordinary gifts how special I am. I just have this energy about me, and I've always had it. It doesn't always bring the best things around, though. I have a ton of experiences, if by the end of this story anyone wants to hear more. So I'm female. I was born in South America, and we moved to the US when I was very young. My mother always told me about the things I saw and would speak to them. The story I'm about to tell would be in an apartment complex we had lived in for years, but we had changed apartments once my mother and bio dad separated. My mom remarried when I was 7. This is all important, by the way. My stepfather, who I call Dad, raised me, but he brought us a lot of spiritual troubles. His baby mama is from PR, and she practices dark magic. She had him bound, and after his ex-wife broke the bond, he found my mother. I have a younger sister at the time. She was 5. I have always seen things, heard, and even smelled strange things that were out of place. Later in my mother's second marriage, things had gone bad. He cheated, but they wanted to make it work. But what they didn't know is that my mother had an evil spirit put on her by the baby mom and the woman he had cheated with to break them apart even more. Whatever they put on her wasn't there just for her, though. My sister, at the age of 7, started to experience sleep paralysis, and so had my mother. My mom would wake up from her sleep being choked, and my closet doors would swing open. The smell of tobacco would linger some days outside my bedroom door. My first day of middle school, I was straightening my hair in the living room. Now, the setup of the living room is important. We had 2 couches in an L shape, but with a gap where they should have met, and diagonal from that gap was the TV and the glass stand it was on. We had hardwood floors and a little Yorkie teacup who followed me everywhere. The mirror I was using was on the wall behind one of the said couches. In the middle of me doing my hair, I heard my dog's claws pitter-patter their way to the living room, and in the mirror a few seconds after, I saw what I thought to be her little head as she jumped to lay on top of the couch, like where you lay your head. I called to her and nothing. So I made those little noises you make to get your dog's attention. Nothing. I put the straightener down, turned around, no dog. Maybe she jumped down, I thought. I walked up to the couch to see if she's laying on the sofa, and no, she is not. Instead, my heart stops as I see a little boy in the reflection of the TV stand, sitting on the carpet in the middle of the living room. I do a triple take, looking from the carpet to reflection. He was in black overalls, a white shirt, black wet hair, and black eyes. He saw me too. I was in shock, so scared, because I knew I had heard my dog. My eyes tearing up, and I realize what this was. I run to my mom's room, crying out her name and just rushing to open her room door. She was asleep and my dog was next to her. I cried, telling her about the boy with the black eyes in the living room. For a second, she looked at me like I was crazy, until she noticed how serious I was. That day, she started using holy water to cleanse the house, and she decided to seek help for what was attached to her. I will never forget that boy. Neither will my sister, because years later in another apartment complex, she dreamed of him, and I had never even told her about him because it frightened me so much to even think back to that day. She described him to the T. Wet, soaking, really black eyes. But in her dream, there wasn't just him. There was a room full of spirits surrounding her while she slept, and they all had came from the closet out of our then current room. Number 6. The Bus Stop Ghost. The story I'm about to tell you is a true story. Events and places are from memory and all real. I will never forget this. It was the summer of late 70s. The day was very hot. My brother Dennis and I decided to drive to downtown Kenosha, Wisconsin. I always loved that drive from Racine to Kenosha. We were driving downtown in Kenosha. The sun was unbearably hot, thinking very close to 100 degrees for sure. We liked downtown Kenosha because of the sidewalks, sales, and people talking and shopping. Little cafes set outside with the smell of food in the air. It was very nice. As Dennis turned down this one street, we both seen a little old lady flagging us down. She was every bit of 85 years old, solid white hair that was highly curled. Her face features were very much wrinkled and very aged. But the most amazing I saw in this little old lady was the sweat of her, like she just stepped out of a shower. She was soaked, dripping wet. Dennis pulled over and I got out of the car speaking to her. She said, "I tried waiting for the bus, but it was just too hot." I told her it was too hot for her to be waiting on a bus. I proceeded to take her to the car. We asked her where does she want to go. She said a department store around the corner, and she sat in the back seat. She was very quiet. I told her it was not good to be out there as hot as it was. She never said anything. We stopped in front of the store, watched her go in, and then we left. I looked in the back seat and noticed she left a little brown purse with a little strap to it. I turned to my brother and I said, "Oh, Dennis, she forgot her purse." It was about 15 seconds ago we dropped this woman off. We went back. Dennis went in, purse in hand. "Where's the little old lady that just came in this door?" He described her. Dennis asked. The cashier said no lady came in here with that description. Dennis tried to tell this cashier he just dropped her off here. Again, the cashier said, "I never seen her." And she was right at the front door. Dennis was puzzled when he came back to the car. How can this be? He set the purse on the seat in the back. I suggested, "Let's take it to the police. Let them find her." He agreed. People, what happened next, we cannot explain. As soon as we pulled away from the curb, the purse disappeared. I looked back. It was gone. We pulled over and literally tore up the back seat looking for it. It was truly gone. I asked Dennis, "What do we do now?" "We go home," Dennis said. We were so bewildered. Where did that purse go? But what the main question was, we both asked each other, what did we just pick up? Note: I believe we had a supernatural experience. After all these years, I now question myself. Once this lady got in the car, you could hear a pin drop in the back seat. I did all the talking with no answers. The cashier was like 3 or 4 feet from the door. No one entered in. Never seeing a description like my brother said of any female like that. Again, to this day, I ask, what did we pick up? Hello, listeners. Thank you for watching tonight's episode of True Paranormal Ghost Stories as you live the horror with me. If you have a story that you would like to be featured in a future episode, check the description down below and send them over to my email. Do not forget to subscribe and click the notification bell to keep up with future episodes. Thanks for listening. I am your host, Marie Lives the Horror.